Are you aware of how hard you are trying internally all the time? I probably still shouldn't be, working as much as I am. It's a constant battle. I feel like I'm on the edge all the time trying to manage how much can I take? Can I still have my own sense of myself and my happiness?
Welcome, everybody, to the third episode of the Neurodivergent Connections YouTube channel. And I'm Mona Kay. I am the host of the Neurodiverse Love podcast. And I was married for 30 years. We were together for 32, and I've been divorced since 2018. And we didn't find out we were a neurodiverse couple until our 29th year of marriage. So I am so excited to be here, and I'll let my co-hosts introduce themselves.
Oh, I'm Scott. I'm in Canada. I'm a AuDHD dad. I got I'm autistic and I have ADHD. And I didn't know this when I got married. And my wife and I had a child, and then she died a few years after he was born of ovarian cancer, not knowing, neither of us knew that I was different. And that caused a lot of problems, and I'd love to save other people that kind of grief and suffering and enjoy their lives. Also joining us is Greg.
I'm Greg Fuqua. Glad to be here. I'm a licensed mental health therapist in the state of Iowa. I also do coaching for neurodivergence and neurodiverse couples. I'm an autistic clinical specialist and a level 2 neurodiverse couples therapist. I've also been in a neurodiverse relationship for over 30 years. And I also am, and my wife is also late diagnosed, late identified ADHD. I am late identified autistic. And I have a lot to share about my clinical and personal experience around neurodivergence and neurodiversity.
Yay. And I forgot to say that I'm late identified ADHD. So I use my hands a lot. So today we're going to talk about a really important issue that all of us have had challenges with, all three of us, and that is energy. And we're going to talk about a little bit about burnout. We're going to talk about maybe an energy audit, how we can do that, how being respectful of your own energy needs and your partner's energy needs, and talking about that, and really knowing when you are at the point where you need rest, because we don't want to get to that breaking point where we're losing it and we're screaming or we're throwing things or we're not even communicating at all and we're in shutdown. So poor Greg, he has had a week, right? And it would be awesome if you could just share with our listeners kind of the feelings maybe you're having, the craziness that's been going on.
Yeah, this is needing to practice what I preach sort of thing. But it also speaks to the difficulties of managing your energy, particularly when you're neurodivergent. But, part of the idea of this episode was my volunteering of how I'm in a burnout right now. And I just opened my own full-time practice as a counselor and coach. And the 2 weeks I took to sort of pause and make that transitions create a lot of backup, a demand for me. And I did not manage my schedule well, and that filled in. And I ended up doing 31 clients in 4 days this week, not to mention all the extra admin and note stuff I needed to do as it involved that. And it kind of speaks to what some of the problems we sort of run into as neurodivergence, which is I often talk to my clients about having parts that try too hard, essentially, that are compensating for our sense of inadequacy or a lack of sense of belonging or the way we fit into society and what we need to do to make that match happen is a lot of times is trying harder. And so one of the questions I ask my clients is it possible to try too hard? And of course, the answer is absolutely 120% yes.
Mhm.
And I'm example A for that right now. So basically, I feel ill right now. I can't sleep. Luckily, I can still speak, apparently, and think to some degree. But if I stop, things shut down. I can feel my brain glitching here and there. I can feel extreme exhaustion. And, you know, basically, I think what happens to a lot of us is that everyone else sort of determines who we need to be. And as a counselor and coach, the demand and expectations of others often get me lost in them, right?
Mhm.
And other people, and this is also goes to, I think, points of lacking some or having some blind spots around your own identity and sort of entrusting that in other people to tell you who you're supposed to be. And I think I have fallen into that a little bit with, the client demands, and I love my clients. I want to serve them, but who comes first? Those defaults of when stress comes and things get tough is trying harder, is going harder, putting your nose to the grindstone more does not work. And I found this out this week, and I didn't track it. And there's also a sense of I should be able to do this. Right. And so there's a distortion in terms of my real capacities and what I really can do. And that distortion comes from social conditioning, comes from looking at the American working model or Western society's working model of a neurotypical social conditioning of what our work lives are supposed to be. And now I've found myself in a place of really in need for recovery that looks literally like being physically ill. Like I have to baby myself. I have to protect myself. I've got to go lie down. I've got to go find less stimulus, isolation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sort of, the poster boy right now for what we're talking about today.
Yeah. And I think, first of all, Greg, I want you to know how much I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that, because I think everybody needs to hear this. I did an episode on the podcast about the different types of rest with one of my guests. And, I didn't realize as an ADHDer, because I didn't know I was an ADHDer, that I did not know how to rest on a regular basis, right? Because I'm always searching for that dopamine hit, right? And if I can't get enough dopamine, I literally would get depressed. And so I was working, over functioning, and because I was trying to outrun the depression, I think. Right. And when we understand that there are going to be periods of sadness, or there's going to be periods of anxiety, or there's going to be periods of overwhelm, but we also can have that toolbox really close by that includes all the things that can help us rest. Right. And we don't necessarily know what those things are. What do you think, Scott? What are your thoughts?
I can remember being like that when I used to work in broadcasting, and I'd have to work mornings, which would mean getting up at 3:34 in the morning and facing the world in an uncertain way. Like I wouldn't know what I was going into. I'd work a hard day, hard to me, and then go home, and my schedule would be all topsy-turvy. My eating would be all topsy-turvy. And after just a few days of that, I would get so tired that you do feel sick. Like I couldn't stomach eating food. There was nothing I could imagine eating that would satisfy me. And it felt like there was a toxin building up in my blood or my brain. Like there was my brain and body just felt gummed up by something. Like there was some kind of thing accumulating that it could not clear because I wasn't getting rest. That my brain needed to, have the street lights on at night and just flush the streets so that the traffic can flow and not be running with manure, because it just felt like that, like the city that never got the garbage taken out would cease to function and be kind of stinky. And that felt like what my whole body was doing. So I really feel for where Greg's at. Coffee just makes it feel worse, I find, because all it does is turn down the chemical that makes you feel tired. And when your brain's finally clear of the caffeine, it's like, oh, now we can feel just how tired you are. Like it doesn't actually wake you up. It just suppresses the I feel tired bit.
Yeah.
So you're still getting tired. I've heard it said that anxiety is the only fuel you can burn and have more of than when you started. And that burnout is when anxiety ceases to be useful as fuel and just becomes the water you're swimming in. And we can push ourselves very hard. People who say that ADHD or autism is my superpower because I can hyperfocus. I suspect that hyperfocus and that kind of pushing and going is just borrowing resources from the future. And if we don't have the opportunity or, what it takes to rest and rejuvenate and recover, then we're borrowing from the future resources and it never gets replenished. And then we're running in overdraft the whole time. And that's an easy thing to slip into. As much as we love our routines, there are some that we're willing to push aside in the name of, well, as Greg says, of pleasing other people. It's people pleasing. I do like a sense of achievement. I want to look like the guy who can get it all done.
Mm-hmm.
And on paper, it looks like maybe I can. But for all the productivity people who say time management is all it takes, for us, that can't be true. Time isn't necessarily the energy. I just gave away my gimmick there. Time isn't the thing. It's the energy. We only have so much gas in the tank. We only have so much water in the cup. Spoons. Some people talk about spoons. I don't use the spoons. Greg, does that resonate with what you're going through right now?
Neurodivergence, I always tell my clients, you need to be an energy miser. You need to know, where your energy level's at. And this will also overlap into probably Mona's talk around energy auditing. You have to know where you're really at. You don't have the same capacities as a lot of the people. And so one of the questions I ask when I'm sort of assessing for neurodivergence or autism in my clients is, are you aware of how hard you are trying internally all the time? And that, to me, if that's a checkbox for people, and some people aren't even aware of it because that's your normal, right? You don't have anything to compare it to, your internal. The internal experience of the neurodivergent is intense and it's on all the time. I'm trying to navigate the world. I'm trying to watch out for things. I'm trying to figure out where I need to be, who I need to be, what's coming next, what do I have to be ready for, why is this happening? And that's going on, 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And so the room we have to take on more is very vulnerable, very delicate. And so knowing your capacity, being an energy miser is really important. I would say one other thing as it relates to sleep, and I see this all the time. Generally speaking, I see ADHDers as morning people and autistic people as night people. Now, I'm sure that's a stereotype and people can undo that a little bit. And then AuDHDers are both. I don't know. It kind of depends on where you lean. But what I find is that when I get stressed out, I want to stay up longer. And that's not the right response. But the reason I do is because I'm trying to pull back this time for me. Right?
Life stole this from me. I'm going to take back what I can.
Exactly.
Even if it hurts me.
Exactly. Life has stripped me of my own sense of what it is for me and what I get from me. And autistics love this space for themselves, and so trying to pull that back and not getting it and getting more and more tired keeps you in that fight against yourself and against sleep. and also pushes you further and further actually into more burnout.
My therapist asked me some time ago when I was struggling with some of this perfectionist style of this, uh, when is done? Like, when is done? Do you
Mhm.
know when done is so that you can cut it off? And sometimes there's just such a volume of stuff that done becomes what is the minimum level of other people's happiness that I can deliver that is enough that I can stop for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Like how close is everybody involved in everything to thinking I'm an asshole?
Mm.
And if I can keep everybody just above that, then maybe I'll go to bed on time. But if anybody's teetering toward this guy's being a bit of a dick, then I'm gonna like grind harder so that I can protect people's opinion of me, even
Yep.
if it
Yeah.
means I give up some sleep or I have to be somewhere and do something I don't want to do.
That actually
But the
makes
more I get into the whole autistic, I get it thing, the more I'm like trying to protect my yes and not say yes to everything, not say no, try to say yes. But the more I'm in the headspace of like, I only have so much to give and it isn't a whole lot right now. What can I do to protect myself and not try to manage everybody else's happiness? But you can't quit it. I can't quit that drug.
Yeah, so it's so hard to quit. And I really do think it's kind of a drug. I like that you use that analogy because there is a high to kind of searching for other people's approval, and especially when you have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, right? So, and you're a perpetual people pleaser. And I think that goes with a lot of neurotypes, it doesn't go with maybe just one. I mean, I was always a people pleaser. In my marriage, the one thing that I think if I could have addressed earlier would have helped protect my mental health, and that was always taking things personally. So when I felt hurt, I wanted to do more. I wanted to talk more. I wanted to overfunction more because, like you said, Scott, I was looking for a way to be approved of, or be the perfect wife, or be the perfect mother, or be the perfect employee, or whatever. And I think doing that, I caused myself so much stress, so much stress. But I want to share something that now looking back, I understand about my autistic father, who we didn't know was autistic while he was alive. He died way too young at 64, but he was a psychologist and he worked for himself, Greg. So, and he was in private practice for, I don't know, 30 years, let's say. And one of the things he did that wasn't common was he worked a 3-day week. He worked Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Didn't go into the office until he wanted to go into the office. I think his first appointment would be 9 o'clock, sometimes 10. Then he'd come home for dinner every night. At about 6 o'clock, we would eat. And on Mondays and Fridays, he wrote his reports, or he took time for fun or rest. And he did the same thing on the weekends. So 4 days a week, he was choosing what he would do to restore his energy, to rest and relax, and to have fun. Oh my gosh, was he a smart man, right? And I remember on the weekends sometimes, and this might have been, when he had a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday that was filled to the max. Like you're saying, Greg, you saw 31 clients. I know his days were filled, completely filled. I know he didn't really have much downtime. But on the weekends, I remember him literally falling asleep on the couch for hours. And you couldn't wake him up. I mean, he was dead to the world. But that allowed him to start the week.
That's partly autism too, I think.
Yeah, and
Seriously, I think the afternoon sleeping for hours might be partly an autistic thing, not
well,
just
he
how hard
did
you
it.
work.
But he did it, and that wasn't something that was happening in the 70s. People didn't do that, right? They didn't work 3-day weeks. Most people were working Monday through Friday, but he figured out what his body and his brain needed, and you couldn't change his schedule for anything. I mean, he did not even come to my college graduation, which I can laugh about now, but because it didn't fit into his schedule.
As much as it's quirky, and Greg, I know you've consumed a whole lot of literature and have seen this in clients too, but the stuff that wows me when I look back at the autistic people through time and through culture who have figured out this kind of stuff without even knowing they had figured it out. Like the great scientist who went for the same walk every day. And everybody in town thought he was very weird and dressed very peculiarly and spoke strangely. But he had his life set up eccentrically, but perfectly for himself. And in so many ways, that's a privilege that a lot of people in today's society do not have. We have bills to pay, and we're expected to work, whether that work schedule is at all suitable for the way our nervous system functions. So we are trying to wedge ourselves into other people's expectations. Yes, not just because we're people pleasers, but because there is an expectation that the bills are paid. So we are going to make ourselves do things that may not naturally come to us. And that, I mean, that's one way masking harms us. By trying to pretend we're something we're not so we don't look suspicious, we will do things like burn ourselves out.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to poop on capitalism, but I think keeping your citizenry under the threat of poverty if they don't push themselves to the limit of survival is kind of not a nice way to be.
Yeah, and this is where aspects of being autistic and neurodivergent really are can be disabling, and there are ways that we don't quite fit in. If you don't have a strong sense of identity and your identity is constantly being subjected to what feedback you get from other people, you're going to be in trouble. But if you can be, this is where there's plenty of autistic strengths in our rigidity. I'm not doing that, that stubbornness, that autonomy. I know what I'm like. No, and so, in some ways, one of the questions I ask a lot of my younger neurodivergents is, what does it mean to you to be autistic? Or what does it mean to you to be neurodivergent? And of course, a lot of them say, I don't know. I am just myself. And I'm like, good, know yourself. Know your uniqueness. Know what you need. Know that it doesn't have to fit with everybody else. And so, again, a lot of times when I'm trying to get clients to create some changes in themselves, I'm like, listen, I know you have strengths in rigidity. You got to switch that flip. You got to flip that switch and use that for yourself sometimes, and get stubborn. Get, draw upon that want for autonomy, that the knowledge of your uniqueness and what your needs look like, and the willingness to not subscribe to these social norms and demands. And so these, again, are good things to uphold actually as a counterbalance to burnout and energetic problems and trying to work yourself into the work world in a certain way. And I think you bring up a really good point, Scott, about our work lives and the financial threat that's created by, I've never been able to work a full-time job really until I got into mental health counseling. And I probably still shouldn't be, working as much as I am. It's a constant battle. I feel like I'm on the edge all the time trying to manage how much can I take? Can I still have my own sense of myself and my happiness? And so it's a constant battle, and one that we all need our fingers on that pulse for sure.
There is no work-life balance. Like, work is part of life. And if it's not, there's something else going on usually. I've looked at my life, and as I've listened to Mona's podcast, and I've listened to Greg on the podcast, and I've consumed all the literature of the culture, I'm starting to take myself seriously and go, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to work a regular full-time job.
Yeah.
I can probably pull off 2, 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And even then, it's going to have to be like somebody else might have to schedule what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm at this point, I don't know how that's possible because I don't know how I can't imagine a reason for somebody to pay me the amount that I would need to be paid to work a few
Yeah.
days a week. So I don't know what the choices really are in this world for people who do figure it out and go, I can't work more than this without making myself so sick that I can't work.
Yeah.
How do I pay my bills? And
Yeah.
I don't know that there are a lot of great answers out there.
Yeah. And
If
that's
they
why,
are, send them in, write them in the comments, please.
yeah. And you know what? I think this is where we have become a very materialistic society, right? So do we need the house that we're living in with all the accoutrements? Do we have to have a new car every few years? You know, a lot of people subscribe to that. And if you understand your neurotype, then maybe you want to live with family members. You want to live with friends. You want to have a partner. You want to have, a room that you rent out, and that becomes passive income. Who knows what your financial situation looks like in the future? But if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, for sure, you're going to wear yourself out. And so, Greg, I wanted to talk about something you said because I think it has a lot to do with boundaries. And I don't think enough of us understand how to be boundaried. And so our energy gets drawn down to below zero, and we have trouble saying no. And even when we say yes at the expense of ourselves, or we say yes. And this used to happen in my marriage all the time. My ex would say yes to me for pretty much everything, and then he wouldn't follow through. Now
Yep.
I understand that he probably didn't have the energy to follow through, especially if it was something that I was asking him to do on the weekend or an evening after a full day's work. And so I guess my question to both of you is, can we talk about if you created an energy audit for yourself, what might that look like? Because I know for me now at 60 years old, my energy audit starts with me sitting on my front porch, having my tea, reading for at least an hour before I get into working, because that fills my cup. And I have the ability to do that. So is it, getting up at a certain time, taking time to, read, work on something that you're passionate about, go for a walk, go to the gym? What fills your cup and gets your energy to a place where you can actually start a day of work? Scott's thinking.
Yeah.
I'm
So-
thinking that all the answers that I that feel honest that I want to say out loud are probably not appropriate.
Okay. Don't say that.
Well, I don't know. I don't feel like I act like a responsible adult, so I don't feel like I have good answers for that. I think Greg's answers are probably going to be much more useful to people. He's not going to say smoke a couple joints and stand and look at the trees for a while.
But you know what, Scott?
Well,
That might be
yeah.
what some people need to do. Go ahead, Greg.
It could be. I'm not. You know what? If that's what's working for them and getting them through the workday and not making them play Candy Crush for the next 3 hours when their ADHD meds kick in, then I wish them all the best.
Most of my neurodivergent clients have relationship with marijuana or cannabinoids in some way, shape, or form. This works with the particularly autistic, I think, neurology, because it has chemicals that mimic a lot of the things that help regulate appetite, sleep, mood, a lot of the things that we need. And I think it really does relax people's what I call protectors. It allows you to actually relax. It allows you those overfunctioning responses to sort of, soften back a little bit and reconnect with yourself. And reconnection to yourself is a huge part of the support and recovery you need to manage your energy in the world, for sure. The problem, I think, Mona, like you said, is number one, do we need to create habits of self-care that help manage it day to day? Absolutely. If you're someone like me that fights structure and that does not want things to be a certain way, then you're going to fall into these patterns a lot easier. And sometimes you don't catch where you're at until you're over the edge. And so what do you do when you're over the edge, or how do you notice when you're over the edge, And so I've often talked about to my wife about this because I had a hard time tracking this all the time because my standard in the world was irritability. My standard was low capacity. My standard was anger. My standard was disconnection from myself and the world. And so now what I track a lot is my irritability, is my patience, is things like that. And my wife is part of that, and I remember we had a conversation at one point where she said, well, how can I tell you when you're not doing well? And I'm like, don't say to me what's wrong with me, because that is going to feed the very thing that's creating the behavior and the over-adaptation, over-functioning in the first place. And so I had to think about this. I was like, what could she say? What would it sound like? What would I be able to tolerate and be able to come back to myself for a check-in and then be able to vulnerably ask for my needs, or to tell her where I'm at? And it sounded like a passive voice of support. I said, honey, if you say to me, hey, honey, just know that I love you and I'm here for you, nothing else, that's going to cue something in me. Not only is it going to calm my system to know that someone's alongside of me, but I'm not being accused of anything. I'm not being told I'm wrong. I'm not being pointed at as what the hell's wrong with you. I have somebody in my corner and they're saying, I'm here. Just know I'm here. And there's no
It's
pressure
not a
with that.
demand.
Yeah, it's not a demand. Exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth. And this is where this overlaps with demand avoidance. Demand avoidance. I can't take this. Get this off of me, right? Because I don't have the capacity to take it on. And that feels so good. And when she says that to me, my system calms down. I'm able to reflect. I'm able to get out of that moment that I'm just in, right? And be like, oh, that's nice. And what do I need? And what's going on in me? And then I'm like, oh, crap. I've gone too far. I've gone over the edge and I need to acknowledge that. And someone's also safe to bring into that too. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is really beautiful. And I think if partners could do more of what you have advised your wife you need, rather than screaming and yelling or shutting down, that would be really helpful. But when our nervous systems are dysregulated and, we're in a state where you are now, right after 31 clients and all that you have to do, now that you've seen all those people, we need to know what to do proactively, right? We need to have that conversation with our partner before the crisis hits, before we're on burnout, before we're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So, I wish in my marriage, I would have heard from my ex-husband, I need an hour or two to myself to re-energize or to relax. And when if I was told that, I would have said, and probably in the beginning, well, what do you need that time for? I'm just being honest, right? I want to spend time talking to you. Okay. Now, understanding neurodiversity and neurodivergence, I would say, absolutely, that's what you need. Take it. And then, I'm here, like what your wife is saying. But when you don't understand that you're a neurodiverse couple, then there's that judgment and that anger and that, you just spent 8 hours with other people. Why can't you spend time with me?
Right.
So, right, having that conversation either as a couple, and it could be a daily conversation. I'm at a 2 or I'm at a 1, barely, at a 1. I have nothing. And when I share with you that I'm at a 1, I need at least an hour, if not 2 hours of downtime, or I got to go to the gym or I got to whatever. And having those conversations before you're in crisis and knowing what you're going to share with each other, to at least alert your partner where you are. And it may not even be in words. You may not be able to speak. Like you said at the beginning, Greg, that, you were able to find the words today, but tomorrow you may not be able to speak because you may be so burnt out. And it's not because you don't want to maybe talk to your wife or your kids, but you just literally don't have the energy anymore, right? And
Yep.
I know I constantly was judging because I didn't understand it. I didn't
Yep.
understand it. Yeah.
And that I think, Greg, you were nodding when Mona was talking about this. I wonder if you were having the same thought as me, that like how hard it can be the first bunch of times to say what you need. Because if you've been told every time, if they've reacted like Mona used to, then
Yeah.
you'd be scared to. Like, what? You don't want to spend time with me? I did all this for you. I've been supporting your ass all day. You've been cranky all day. What do you do? Like, I can imagine every bad thing that could be thrown at me, and I just want to like keep my head down and get through this. I sometimes don't even like being asked if I'm okay, because to me that question is a pass fail. Like it doesn't ask me is there something you need? Can I make things better for you? It sounds like, are you able to continue? Can you continue? Because do I have to stop? We have to stop this car right now. I'll turn this car around. Like, it just feels like that. Like, are you okay? What's going to happen if I say no? Then I have to explain myself.
Right.
If you just say, I'm here, like, well, oh my gosh, Greg, I can feel your emotion with that. Like, I don't know how you're speaking even today. When I'm in that state, I can't even see a TV commercial because it'll make me cry if it's the least bit sappy.
Yeah. Let me tell you how I'm functioning, and let me tell you that. So a little bit of what you're speaking to is both sensitivities, which Mona mentioned, rejection sensitivity, and also recognition euphoria as high sensitivity for neurodivergence. Again, because we get a lot of our understanding of ourselves in the world by how people have told us how we are or need to be. But I'm an internal family systems practitioner. And what does that mean? That means that our psyche is actually a bunch of parts. We're parted out. We're compartmentalized. And I believe the neurodivergent mind tends to be more compartmentalized. And some of that has to do with both polytropism and monotropism, that there's these aspects or facets to ourselves. When the going gets tough, this overfunctioning response in me has really been finely honed over my 54 years. And I have parts that show up amazingly when the shit hits the fan. And so this is what happened on the podcast. I've talked to Mona about this, is my anxiety would build up into the moment of the podcast. And then I'd be a wreck. And then the podcast would come on and a part would show up that's hyper-focused, super creative, understands dynamics and connections, and can totally feed off that moment. And I get done with the episode. I'm like, what the hell just happened? I've got this awesome part, and it's activated by anxiety, right? And so when the anxiety started hitting during the week, here comes the podcast. I'd be like, oh, my part's going to show up for me, this incredible gift, this strength in me. And so part of what I've done today is be so kind and compassionate in acknowledging and celebrating the fact that I know I've got these parts that will show up for me, and I want to be partnered with them. I want to acknowledge them. And when I do, they calm down. And when I partner with them, they don't have to take over as much, And so I've developed this relationship with myself that allows me to not just overburden these parts and become exhausted, but recognize that they're there and that they're wonderful gifts and strengths. And these are aspects of me that have been, like I said, fine-tuned over my years of having to figure out how to be my best in the world all the time. And they're still there working for me, And so my relationship with them is the thing that allows me to function in these spaces. And I admit it, I want to. I also want to go to sleep right now, but I also want to. And because I love this work. I love doing it. I love bringing a light to this stuff. And so the same thing happened. As soon as I got on, boom, everything else, all of the shit that I was feeling, I can still feel it in the background, went away, and this part showed up again. This part that will be like, I will be here for you. And my relationship with this part has allowed me to actually expand my capacities without exhausting or overburdening my system.
Mm.
So internal family systems, brilliant way to work with yourself. Great thing to look into as a way to kind of help functioning and to know what are those facets and those activations in you. How do those work? And how do you work with them?
I'm
Better.
excited to learn more about that. I really am, because I love the way you put that. I sometimes feel like I'm driving around with a minivan full of people,
Yeah.
and they each want something. And
Yes.
I'm the guy going through the drive-through, and I've got to
Yeah.
manage them all, and they all are picky, and they all, if I ignore any of them, they just start yelling.
Yeah. So IFS really makes tangible the mechanisms and facets to your psyche and your internal system. And I have relationships with them now instead of just being in it and things taking over and me being twisted this way and that way, and I'm pretending like I'm so freaking aware that, but I'm not a lot of times, but I do know how to work with my system. And having these skills have really helped me through a lot of stressors and also help understand my gifts, really be on my own side. So a lot of times I'll tell my clients, you are trying so hard. Can you just acknowledge how good some of your parts are working for you and how they'll show up for you? And they're like, I just felt my whole system calm down. And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so important.
So important. And I love IFS. I think it's amazing. I am not a IFS practitioner, but I've read probably almost every book out there. Listened to Richard Schwartz, who developed IFS, on many podcasts and video casts and whatever. And I think there's another author out there. Her name is Jill Bolte. And Dr. Jill Bolte, she had a stroke. And so she lost function in various parts of her brain. And if you have not read her, I think she has 2 books out now. She talks about naming the 4 parts of like her brain that come out at various times, either to protect her or to help her function and whatever. And by naming them with a real name, like that's Nancy showing up today, that's Gertrude showing up today, that's, whatever, Ralph showing up today, she welcomes them and thanks them like with IFS, but she also knows that they serve her in really important ways to help her function and also to help her heal after the stroke. She needed all of this. Fascinating, 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 because if we're always fighting the parts of ourselves that maybe annoy us or annoy others, then we do get dysregulated. But if we embrace them, thank them and acknowledge them, it just absolutely changes how we function. And, I think that I know that everybody listening is probably thinking, okay, I can totally see myself in everything that Scott, Mona, and Greg have said. How the heck do I manage my energy? And do I create an environment that works for me and my neurotype? And so I just want to put out there a few things, and I'd love to have a discussion about these. So I really think we need to acknowledge our environment. So, if you're working in an open office and you hear everybody's conversation, the fluorescent lights, all that stuff, that may be creating so much of a load on your energy. It may be draining you minute by minute. If you have to go on public transportation to get to work, all the scents and smells. And, we talked about sensory issues during the last episode. What other alternatives do you have? If you have to spend a lot of time, and we all, unfortunately, or a lot of people do, on Zoom, and you have to have all that stimulation coming at you, right? And you have to talk at meetings, whether they're Zoom or in person. Understanding what takes your energy, pulls your energy literally from your body, to the point that when you either leave that environment, leave that meeting, leave that conversation with another human being, because I'm all about staying away from energy vampires. And we all have them in our lives, right? And especially if we're in the helping profession, those folks that just want to spill, their entire dramatic stories to us every time they sit with us, it can get a little overwhelming. But understanding all those things that drain our energy, and then really creating a toolbox that includes the things that re-energize us and allow us to rest, I think can be the difference between constant burnout, overwhelm, irritability, as you said, Greg. I know for me, when I saw myself losing patience, I knew it was time to rest, or it was time to do something fun, or it was time to sit in front of the TV and just watch HGTV. That really was my go-to place. But then I also turned to alcohol, right? And I turned to eating. So what I want to talk about is the healthy ways that we can re-energize and we can rest, rather than the unhealthy ways that we numb, right? Or cover up the challenges we're having. Thoughts?
Greg,
Absolutely.
what are you going to do to recharge, man?
Yeah. What am I going to do? Yeah. So I just canceled a thing I was supposed to do tomorrow morning, and it's something that I've been invested in, I've been working towards, which is a gravel bicycle race that I was going to be doing, and our club is hosting it, and I'm one of the board members on our club. And I just called up the director and said, I'm not going to show up, and I need this for myself. And I didn't apologize, but I'm saying this is where I'm at, and he totally gets it, And so number one is I'm saying no to everything that's immediately in front of me. I didn't say no to this, but part of that is knowing how I'll respond to this in a way, meaning that this will feel. What's funny is that it didn't feel like a burden, but it's because I have such a good relationship now with my part here, is that I'm completely confident I can do this, where before I wasn't, but that's an extra stressor on me, so number one, I've said no to pretty much everything for this weekend, and I tried to go out and play some disc golf, which is one of my major recovery things that I do. I love watching the dynamics of a spinning object through the air. That regulates my system in a crazy way. I have another client who's a surfer, and I was talking to him about this. I was like, I was even talking to my brother. I'm like, why does disc golf regulate my system? Even watching it, I'm like, oh, it feels so good. It's because my brain works with dynamics. I just love to see things in flow. And if you can look at my artwork back here, and if I could show you more, you would totally get it. So number one, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do things that help me take any stress off decision making. For instance, I am not going to cook, and I love cooking, but I'm not going to do it. Right. I am going to find food that gets delivered to me.
Yeah. Love it.
And then, I'm going to try to refine myself in small ways. The truth is, I am in a place where I'm scared, actually. I'm actually feel like I don't know if I can get out this. I don't, part of it is that I have to bracket the future.
Mm.
I really do. I've got to give my space to me right now. And I can't think about Monday. Fuck Monday. I
Mhm.
need my time right now. As soon as I start thinking about, I am so burnt out and here comes next week, I will not recover. Right. And so, how do I do that? I've got to be more present with myself and where I'm in my moments, and also just be checking those defaults, those over functioning defaults. So I don't think I've got a good answer for it, but that's what I know I'm going to try to work towards this weekend.
I love it, Greg, and thank you for that. And I'm just going to kind of put that in some kind of box if it helps the listeners. Number one, I heard you say that you're going to take control of your schedule for the weekend because you are burnt out. Acknowledging that and being able to cancel plans. And for those folks that have partners who you see canceling plans on the weekends when you've planned something for weeks or months
Yeah.
ahead of time, know that your partner is not trying to hurt you, that when they're sharing that, you can get curious and ask, what do you need? Is there something that I can do to help you re-energize? I'm going to go by myself to this event if it was something you were planning on doing together. But to make your partner feel guilty because they're canceling, which I did all the time. I was guilty of making my ex feel guilty for canceling things or being late. I mean, he was perpetually late. And I know I was wrong in doing that, but I didn't understand what was underneath it. Okay, so I'm owning that. So having a partner who feels comfortable saying no to you in a kind, respectful way, because screaming at your partner, "I'm not going," that's not a good idea, right? Being boundaried and saying, I can't do anything this weekend because I have, a full schedule for next week. And I want to be able to be there for my clients or, my work or whatever. And being boundaried about not having the ability to cook, right? When you're usually the one doing the cooking. And either ordering out if you have the financial ability to do that, or to ask somebody else to do it, or to always have those things in the refrigerator or freezer that you can pull out, or in the cabinets you can pull out, have simple meals, right? I love that you're taking care of yourself in that way. And really those are things that are part of your toolbox, right?
And all those revolve around, like you said, the awareness, the acknowledgement, and then moving towards self-compassion. Like, I'm trying so hard for myself.
Yeah.
I'm trying so hard for the people I care about and my clients. This is why this happened. Beating myself up will not help here. Right. And yeah, someone else beating me up certainly won't help either. And yeah, man, is that going to be a pushback? And what's wonderful is, as soon as I tell my wife this, she will be like, "Oh my God, let me know what I can do to help and support you."
Mm.
Absolutely, absolutely is what I'm going to hear from her. She is attuned to me. She knows what this means as having an autistic partner. I can remain alive in her as we work through our weekend. And that feeling is so good, right? Opposed to feeling of more pressure, right? Which is what would happen for you, Mona, is maybe I can create more pressure and get him to do what I want him to do, right?
That's what I was doing.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and stress and pressure, as I've said before, amplify neurodivergent traits, ADHD traits too, for sure. As soon as we're trying to get out the door, my wife is doing 20 things for some reason. and so that stress and pressure just creates more of that scattered polytropic mind. It doesn't help. I'm going to have more shutdown and more irritability and more anger if someone's going to create pressure on me when I know where I'm at. Now, this can also partially be a problem of the fact that you're right. I've invested my whole week into my work in ways that are unhealthy. Okay. And I've got to acknowledge that too. And so since I've put so much of me into that, and I've gotten so much of my own worth out of that, okay, yeah, it's created a sacrifice for my partner. And I have to acknowledge that too. I can't pretend like, you know, the whims of my energy and my emotions are just put on everybody else. No, I have to have ownership of some stuff too here.
That is so powerful. And I know that you're getting emotional, Greg, and I want to give you a virtual hug. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're a hugger, but I just want to. And I want to acknowledge there's something that you said earlier, and I did not know this. All the episodes of the podcast that you've co-hosted with me and done a phenomenal job. I didn't know what you were feeling prior to us starting our conversations because you did have that part that took over and was able to perform so well. And what I want folks to hear is those parts can be really great at times, right? But they can also cause so much anxiety and overwhelm that there's so much cortisol going through our systems when we're in that anxious, overwhelmed kind of trauma response. We could get ourselves sick. And you started this episode by talking about that you're feeling sick. And so I want to say to the audience, the listeners, we don't want you to get to the point where you're sick. We don't want you to be at the point where you're so irritable, you're screaming at your partner. We don't want you to get fired from a job because you walk in and you start, throwing things because you've got another meeting you want to attend. What we want you to do is acknowledge that you can do your own energy audit. You can figure out what you need in all the different parts of your life, and it may change daily. But by doing that for yourself and then having hopefully compassionate, clear communication with your partner, maybe on a daily basis about where you are and what you need, it can be not only a game changer, it can be a life and a relationship changer. And, I am very fortunate. I'm 60 years old. I am semi-retired. I get to make my own schedule. I get to do only the things that are, excuse me, but I'm going to say an F yes or a hell yes. I'm very, very fortunate. And what I notice, Greg and Scott, is every time I'm attempting to say yes to something that isn't a hell yes, I feel it in my body right away. The cortisol starts flowing. I get anxious or angry or irritable, not in a good way, because you can get anxious when you're about to go on stage and you're going to perform, right? You can get anxious when you're learning a new task that's important for your job. That's good anxiety, or that's good stress. It helps move you forward. I immediately know when I'm feeling that not good anxiety. But it took me 60 years to get here. So
Yeah.
I just, I want to kind of pull all this together because, Greg, you've been really, really vulnerable and really open. And I'm glad we did this episode because I think it's going to hit home for a lot of folks out there. Do you guys have anything else you want to share? Scott, anything? I know you've been listening intently.
I've been listening. And Greg, I totally feel your pain, and I want us to wrap up so you can go like sleep or eat whatever fuels you.
Yes.
I'll end with a quick story, which draws on things that nerds will understand. Mona, you can tune this part out, because this is computer stuff. So there's something in Windows called Resource Manager. I don't know why, but I find it beautiful to watch when my computer's doing hard things because it shows me how much the CPU is being used, how much of the memory is being used, how much disk access is being used, and how much the network is being used, and sometimes even the graphics card. And if I think of my brain similar, whatever, in parts like that, it's interesting to watch what parts are being drawn on. What is my brain doing more information transfer? Am I absorbing things? Am I reading and writing and whatever? Different things take different amounts of power. It also shows me how much power it's taking the computer to use this? Is this program taking a lot of power by all the stuff it's doing? And so I can watch. And if my computer's starting to act goofy, I can look at it and go, well, there's a rogue thing over here that's using a whole lot of power and stealing ability from the rest of the computer. So I can then, if I'm doing an energy audit myself, go through my day and go, what is hard to endure that draws me faster than stuff where I'm in an environment that is more suitable to me. And then a quick story about my horrible iPhone. You can't change the batteries on these things. The battery dies and then you need a new battery or you need a new phone. And I had a phone that had quirks. We all think a phone's a phone, right? It's an iPhone. It's going to recharge the same way as any other iPhone and draw power the same way as any other iPhone. Turns out that's not true. Sometimes I could get to 9 o'clock in the morning and be down to 40%. Sometimes I'll go the whole day and have lots left at the end of the day. I don't feel like I'm doing that much different, but different use cases and different applications are going to draw power faster. It doesn't recharge the same way as other phones. There's certain parts of it that recharge fast, like the first 40% might charge real quick, but that last bit, I can't get it above 80. And some days I just can't, it won't do anything if it's less than 40%, just stuff starts crashing. If I think of my own energy the same way, and other people's too, that might cut some assumptions I have about what it's going to take for other people to recover from their day. They don't use power the same way as I do, maybe, and it takes them different stages to recharge. They might even need a different kind of plug.
So what happens when they lose their plug, Scott? What happens when they lose their plug or their charger, right? They're in real burnout, right?
Gotta have backups for that, says the guy with like a zillion cables on his desk. That's my thing. My kid, when there's a delivery, he's like, "Did you get more cables?" So like, don't assume that because you recover by going for a walk or talking with friends that your partner is going to be the same. For them, hiding in the basement and playing RuneScape for 6 hours might be what they need, as strange as that sounds. Talking to you might be the last thing they need, because as much as they love you, it's a demand on attention. It's a draw. It's somebody I have to perform for. And sometimes when you're that burned out, performing is the last thing you want. Although for me, that's a regenerative, it gives me energy. After this, my kid's coming home in about a minute, so I should wrap up. But I'm going to do some karaoke, because I tell you what, getting on live stream and rocking out, that restores me.
Awesome. It's part of your toolbox. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the analogies. And I think that's going to hit home for so many people, because when you see or you hear an analogy that makes sense, you're like, oh, the light bulb goes off. So those were really good.
I thought of it like that.
Yeah, I never thought of it. Yeah, Greg, what about you? What do you want to share before we wrap up?
Great metaphor, Scott. Yeah, I think what you said about, being attuned to your body is like really important. It's very easy to be in the moment and the body becomes something that's sort of pushed down in terms of attunement. So knowing where those little tensions are in terms of internal conflict can tell you a lot, and if you've normalized that and don't notice it, you're going to find yourself in a repeat pattern of burnout. So all I would say is listen to your body. Also know what activates the overcompensation for you, and a lot of times it's the threat or the fear of something. And so also know those triggers that create those overfunctioning responses in you. Again, so you can sort of, again, track those, stay ahead of those, and help manage your energy better.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm just going to kind of reiterate the two things you just said: understanding your triggers and understanding your patterns. That has been so vitally important for me. When I understand my triggers, then I know it's time for me to step away and do something to regulate my nervous system, because people are going to trigger you, experiences are going to trigger you, environments are going to trigger you. That's never going to go away, I don't believe, but you are going to be able to find ways to manage your nervous system when you're triggered, if you choose to. And then looking at patterns. That's something that I've done since my divorce, looking at patterns of things that dysregulated me during my marriage because I knew I wanted to keep dating. And I didn't want to repeat those patterns. So I had to understand what was making me impatient, what was causing irritability, what was making me not the greatest partner at times, and working on those things so that I could have more joy and more fun and more peace in my life. And I did it, It's not perfect every day, but gosh, it's so much better. So, Greg, I want to say, I hope you have the most relaxing and re-energizing weekend, doing exactly what your soul and your spirit and your body and your heart and your brain needs. I'm putting that out to you. And
Thank you so much.
yeah. And Scott, thank you so much. I love your analogies, your metaphors, your sense of humor. It's really great. You guys, I hope that those folks that are, joining us on the channel feel comfortable sharing thoughts about what we're talking about and also feel comfortable asking us questions. We're trying to answer all of them. Sometimes you'll get two of us answering the question. And please subscribe if you haven't, and tell us what other topics you're interested in having us discuss. So thank you, everybody, for being here on the Neurodivergent Connections YouTube channel.